The Grand Council Chamber of the Galactic Assembly was a testament to the diversity and technological advancement of the dozens of sentient species that called the Milky Way their home. Massive crystalline windows revealed the swirling cosmic dance of stars beyond, while anti-gravity platforms held delegates from worlds spanning thousands of light years. The chamber hummed with the quiet confidence of a civilization that had endured for millennia, weathering cosmic events and interspecies conflicts with equal measure of diplomacy and technological superiority. Today, however, an unusual tension permeated the chamber. The human delegation, led by Ambassador Ilara Vance, had requested an emergency audience with the full council. Though humans had only joined the Galactic Assembly 3 decades prior, making them relative newcomers, they had quickly established themselves as energetic, ambitious contributors to the galactic community. Their adaptable technology and nonlinear problem-solving approaches had earned them a place at the table, if not always in the most critical strategic decisions where the elder species dominated. High Counselor Lyranol, a member of the ancient Eldarin species, watched with narrowed violet eyes as Ambassador Vance approached the central speaking platform. Unlike many council members, Lyranol had developed a certain respect for humans' potential. Her species' natural ability to sense subtle energy currents had detected something unique in humans, an adaptability and persistence that others often overlooked. Still, she was bound by council traditions and politics that had served the galaxy for thousands of years. "The human delegation is recognized," announced the council moderator, his tentacled appendages waving in formal patterns that dated back to the first assembly. Ambassador Vance stood straight-backed in her formal diplomatic uniform, her silver-streaked dark hair pulled back severely from a face that betrayed no emotion. When she spoke, her voice was clear and unwavering. "Esteemed members of the Galactic Council, I come before you today with a formal notification. As of this moment, Earth and all human colonies are withdrawing from all treaties, alliances, and data exchange protocols with the Galactic Assembly, effective immediately." The chamber erupted in a cacophony of translated exclamations, translator modules struggling to keep pace with the outbursts in dozens of languages. The moderator was forced to activate the harmonic dampeners to restore order. Grand Marshal Kthar of the warrior KRYLL species slammed his armored fist against the metallic surface of his delegation's platform. His reptilian features contorted with barely contained fury. "Explain yourself, human." Such an action without provocation is tantamount to betrayal of the highest order. Vance turned to face the imposing figure, her composure unbroken. "Our withdrawal stems from irreconcilable differences in threat assessment priorities and long-term strategic methodologies." Science Delegation Leader Vexos, a member of the hyperlogical Zenhar species, leaned forward. His elongated cranium pulsed with the bioluminescent patterns that indicated intense analytical processing. "Your explanation lacks both specificity and supporting data, Ambassador. Our combined monitoring networks detect no anomalous threats that would warrant such an extreme response. Your actions are not supported by objective reality." A murmur of agreement rippled through the chamber. Humans had always been considered somewhat impulsive and emotional by galactic standards, but this behavior seemed beyond comprehension. "I regret that I cannot provide further details," Vance replied. "Our decision is final." Lyranol felt a disquieting ripple in the energy fields surrounding the human ambassador, something akin to fear, but more complex. A resolute dread, perhaps. Whatever motivated this action, the humans genuinely believed it necessary. "Ambassador Vance," Lyranol spoke, her melodious voice carrying naturally across the chamber without technological amplification. "I sense great conviction in your decision, but also great cost. Would you not reconsider and share your concerns with those who have been your allies these many years?" For the first time, something flickered across Vance's composed features, a momentary sadness quickly suppressed. "We cannot. The path we must now walk, we must walk alone." With those words, she stepped from the platform and, without another glance at the council, proceeded toward the chamber's exit, her delegation following in equally solemn silence. Thar's translator struggled to keep pace with his outburst of Carillion war dialect. Let the record show that humanity has chosen cowardice and madness over the collective wisdom of species that sailed the stars while their ancestors still cowered in caves. Vexos raised a slender hand. Analysis suggests an 87.3% probability that humanity has detected what they believe to be a grave threat. However, with a 99.8% confidence level, I can state that no data exists to support the existence of any threat undetected by Council technologies. The logical conclusion is that humans are responding to a false positive, perhaps a misinterpreted astronomical phenomenon or a mass psychological event specific to their neurology. The chamber buzzed with debate, theories ranging from human insanity to elaborate plots for technological advantage. Only Lyranol remained silent, troubled by the energy patterns she had sensed, patterns that spoke of conviction, not deception. Finally, Thar's voice cut through the din. I move that we formally record humanity's choice in the Council archives. His reptilian eyes gleamed with contempt. Let history remember that humans, with their characteristic arrogance and short-sightedness, have chosen a path that leads to their own destruction. They cannot survive alone in this harsh universe. The motion passed with overwhelming support. Only Lyranol and a handful of delegates abstained. As the formal proclamation was entered into the timeless crystal archives of the Council, humanity, through arrogance and short-sightedness, has chosen the path to its doom. The delegates quickly moved on to other matters. The galaxy was vast, its politics complex, and humanity had always been just one voice among many. Few noticed Lyranol's troubled gaze lingering on the doors through which Ambassador Vance had departed, or the slight tremor in her aged hands as she sensed something elusive yet disturbing in the cosmic energies, like distant thunder before a storm that no one else could hear. In the secure Strategic Command Center beneath the rebuilt Pentagon complex in Washington, a tense gathering of Earth's leadership had assembled. The room, buried hundreds of meters underground, was shielded from every known form of surveillance technology in the galaxy. Earth President Sarah Jenkins stood at the head of the table, her normally warm features hardened by the weight of the decisions facing humanity. To her right sat Strategic Intelligence Director Marcus Thorne, his dark eyes constantly scanning data streams on the hollow displays embedded in the table. Across from him was his brother, Dr. Eris Thorne, Chief Science Officer of Project Aquila, nervously adjusting his glasses, a quirky anachronism in an age of perfect medical vision correction. General Eva Rostova, commander of the System Defense Fleet, completed the quartet, her military posture unwavering even in this secure setting. Ambassador Vance has completed her withdrawal statement to the Council. President Jenkins announced, breaking the heavy silence. We are officially on our own. Good, General Rostova stated firmly. The longer we maintain the charade of cooperation, the more vulnerable we remained. That's debatable, Marcus Thorne countered. We've lost access to valuable intelligence networks and early warning systems. Warning systems that were blind to what's coming, Dr. Thorne interjected, pushing a holographic projection into the center of the table. The abyssal signature doesn't register on any Council technology. Their sensors are tuned to the wrong frequency, searching for the wrong patterns. The projection showed fragmented data blocks and images of artifacts recovered from a forgotten deep space sector, remnants of a civilization that predated the Council itself. What had started as a routine archaeological expedition 5 years ago had uncovered something that defied conventional understanding. Evidence of a non-material entity or phenomenon that operated on cycles spanning millennia, capable of eroding reality structures or assimilating consciousness on a massive scale. Show me the latest projection model, Jenkins requested. Dr. Thorne expanded the hologram, revealing a simulation of spreading distortion patterns across a galactic map. The abyssal signature is accelerating. Our deep space monitoring stations, equipped with subspectrum sensors, are detecting fluctuations that match the patterns described in the artifacts. We're talking about a threat that operates on principles the Council's science cannot even measure, let alone counter. In Project Aquila, Jenkins asked, "We're ahead of schedule on the Harmonizer network," Dr. Thorne replied, adjusting the display to show a planetary grid of strange spiral-shaped installations. The planetary nodes are at 92% capacity, and the orbital stations will be completed within 3 months. The theory extracted from the artifacts suggests that once fully operational, the network will generate a harmonic resonance field that stabilizes local reality structure against abyssal intrusion. At what cost? Jenkins asked quietly. The room fell silent. The redirecting of nearly 40% of global resources to Project Aquila had required unprecedented secrecy and economic restructuring. The public knew only of a massive defense infrastructure rebuild, with manufactured tensions with the Council serving as cover. Countless careers had been sacrificed, relationships strained, and normal lives disrupted in service to a threat that most of humanity couldn't even be told about. "Whatever the cost," General Rostova finally said, "it's better than the alternative." Dr. Thorne nodded grimly. The artifacts were quite clear about what happened to the civilization that created them. They detected the abyssal signature too late, tried to warn others, and were ignored. By the time the threat fully manifested, it was already too late. Their consciousness, their very reality, was consumed. Marcus Thorne scrolled through reports on his datapad. What about the deep space outposts? Any new data? Outpost Sentinel-7, equipped with our most advanced subspectrum sensors, has been detecting what we're calling whispers, weak, scattered signatures that match the abyssal pattern. They're still distant, but Dr. Thorne paused. They're getting stronger and more coherent. And the Explorer drone we sent into the Delta Pavonis anomaly? Jenkins asked. Marcus pulled up the final transmission log. Last data burst was heavily corrupted. Before going silent, it registered massive distortions in what should have been empty space. Something is there, something that doesn't register on conventional sensors, but completely disrupted the drone systems. This is why we had to leave the Council, Jenkins stated firmly. They would have dismissed our evidence, wasted precious time debating while the threat grew. We couldn't risk it. Not everyone on the Council lacks insight, Marcus noted. High Counselor Lyranel seemed receptive when I met her last year. She senses things others miss. One intuitive alien doesn't outweigh a chamber full of skeptics, General Rostova countered. The KRYLL would have demanded military solutions against an enemy they couldn't see or understand. The Zendar would have lost months running experiments while demanding more data. We made the right call. President Jenkins rose from her chair, surveying the small group that held humanity's fate in their hands. Then we proceed as planned. Project Aquila enters its final phase. We stand alone against what's coming, and pray we've prepared enough. And if we haven't, Marcus asked quietly. Dr. Thorne closed the holographic display with a gesture. Then no one will be left to record our failure. The colossal engineering facility that housed the Harmonizer Network's central control hub sprawled across what had once been a remote desert. Now it pulsed with activity as thousands of engineers, scientists, and workers raced to complete the most ambitious project in human history. Dr. Eris Thorne moved through the facility's main concourse, fatigue evident in every step. For 7 years, he had led the scientific team that translated the ancient artifacts and developed the core technologies of Project Aquila. What had begun as a theoretical challenge, interpreting the mathematical and conceptual framework of a civilization dead for millennia, had become humanity's last, best hope. Dr. Thorne, a young engineer, hurried toward him, tablet in hand. We've got the final calibration results for the harmonic frequency synchronization. Thorne took the tablet, scanning the data with practiced efficiency. His initial skepticism about the artifact's theories had long since given way to conviction as test after test validated their principles. The harmonizer technology didn't destroy or attack in conventional terms. Instead, It reinforced the fundamental structure of reality itself, creating a field that the abyssal entity couldn't penetrate or corrupt. The frequency drift is still within acceptable parameters, he noted, returning the tablet. Proceed with the installation of the final orbital nodes. As the engineer hurried away, Thorne's personal communicator vibrated. The ID signature showed it was his brother. Eris, are you somewhere secure? Marcus's voice was tense. In my office in 5 minutes. What's happened? Pathfinder has made contact. Direct confirmation. Thorne's steps quickened as dread and validation mixed in equal measure. The long-range scout vessel Pathfinder had been designed for one purpose: to venture closer to Council space than any other human ship, equipped with the experimental technologies derived from Project Aquila. Its crew of 12 was handpicked, the best pilots, engineers, and scientists with the psychological profiles most resistant to external influence. Captain Maya Rivera sat rigid in the command chair as alarms blared across the bridge. Status, she demanded. We've entered some kind of spatial distortion, Lieutenant Quan reported from the navigation station. Conventional sensors show nothing, but the subspectrum sensors are going crazy. Something's. Here, Captain. Rivera activated the ship-wide comm. All personnel, activate neural safeguards. This is not a drill. The crew quickly attached small devices to their temples, prototypes developed by Dr. Thorne's team, designed to generate a localized version of the harmonizer field directly around the human brain. I've never seen readings like this, the science officer reported, voice trembling despite her training. It's like reality itself is thinning around us. Rivera felt it too, a subtle wrongness that transcended normal perception. Thoughts that didn't feel like her own began to whisper at the edges of her consciousness. The ship's systems flickered, displays showing impossible data before resetting. Initiating emergency protocol firewall, she ordered. Deploy the test harmonizer. The engineering officer's hands flew across his console, activating the experimental device mounted in the ship's core. A low, resonant hum vibrated through the hull as the harmonizer came online, generating its reality-stabilizing field. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The strange thoughts receded, and the ship's system stabilized. But on the subspectrum displays, they could see what conventional sensors missed, a pattern of non-material energy, like a vast, unseen predator, recoiling from the harmonizer's influence. Record everything, Rivera commanded. We need to get this data back to Earth. As Pathfinder retreated from the distortion zone, the science team worked frantically to analyze what they'd encountered. What they found confirmed their worst fears. The abyssal signature wasn't just a distant threat. It was actively probing, testing boundaries, and its pattern suggested an intelligence far more alien and dangerous than anything humanity had encountered among the stars. When they transmitted their findings back to Earth via quantum entanglement communicators, the message was simple and chilling. Abyssal contact confirmed. Threat level exceeds projections. Aquila timeline must accelerate. 7 years had passed since humanity's dramatic exit from the Galactic Council. The initial shock had given way to dismissive indifference among most council members. Humanity's tantrum, as Kthar often referred to it, had become a cautionary tale, a lesson on the dangers of species acting against collective wisdom. Council chambers once again buzzed with the familiar rhythms of galactic politics, trade disputes, minor border skirmishes, cultural exchange initiatives. The void left by humanity's absence had quickly filled with other concerns. Yet in the quiet corners of the Council's vast bureaucracy, troubling anomalies began to accumulate, too scattered and diverse to form a pattern in the minds of most. A Zentaur research station in the Cygnus Arm reported unexplained sensor malfunctions, brief moments when their ultra-precise instruments recorded physically impossible values before returning to normal function. Vexos, now elevated to Chief Science Administrator, attributed it to equipment fatigue and ordered replacements. 3 merchant vessels disappeared along well-traveled routes, their emergency beacons never activating. The incidents, separated by months and occurring in different sectors, were classified as unexplained navigational accidents after cursory investigations found no evidence of piracy or mechanical failure. On a distant colony world, authorities documented a strange episode of mass cognitive dissonance, a 6-hour period during which a third of the population reported experiencing identical nightmares, followed by temporary difficulty distinguishing reality from imagination. Council sociologists attributed it to environmental factors, perhaps a rare atmospheric phenomenon affecting brain chemistry. Only High Counselor Lyranol, whose sensitivity to energy patterns had grown more acute with age, felt an unsettling familiarity in these disparate reports. The same emptiness she had sensed around Ambassador Vance years ago seemed to echo faintly through the galaxy, like ripples spreading across a vast pond. When she attempted to correlate the incidents, seeking patterns that conventional analysis might miss, she found her inquiries subtly obstructed by bureaucratic processes. Thar dismissed her concerns as mystical nonsense, while Vexos politely requested empirical data that meets scientific standards before dedicating resources to her theories. In her private chambers, Lyranol meditated on these disturbances, reaching out with her species' unique perceptive abilities. What she sensed troubled her deeply, a growing emptiness that seemed to be watching, waiting, spreading. Meanwhile, in a research laboratory orbiting a distant star system, a small group of independent Xenar scientists had begun to notice something unusual in the error patterns of their quantum instruments. The anomalies didn't appear random, as equipment failures should. Instead, they displayed subtle, non-random patterns that suggested external influence. This defies statistical probability, the lead researcher noted, reviewing the compiled data. These errors are structured, perhaps a previously unknown form of cosmic radiation, a colleague suggested, or something else entirely. The researcher murmured, initiating a deeper analysis protocol that would take months to complete. The absolute certainty that had allowed the Council to dismiss humanity's warnings was beginning to develop hairline cracks, too small to threaten the structure yet, but spreading nonetheless. The crisis escalated with frightening speed. An entire star system near the galactic rim began experiencing what Council scientists termed synchronized energetic depletion. All stellar bodies simultaneously showing reduced output and erratic behavior. The phenomenon defied known astrophysics, with planets exhibiting orbital perturbations that violated gravitational constants. 3 major warp gates in the Council's transportation network suffered catastrophic malfunctions within days of each other. Thousands of lives were lost as ships materialized partially phased or with their atomic structure scrambled. The technology that had operated flawlessly for centuries suddenly seemed unreliable. Reports flooded in from multiple sectors of localized reality ruptures, spaces where physical laws temporarily bent or changed. Objects passing through these zones emerged altered, sometimes in ways that shouldn't have been possible, violating conservation of mass and energy. The Council, finally recognizing the severity of the threat, dispatched a battle fleet to investigate the source of the disturbances. When the fleet reached the coordinates of the most severe anomalies, they encountered no enemy vessels, no recognizable threat. Only a spreading zone of what the commander described as silent space that their sensors couldn't penetrate. The flagship ventured closer, maintaining constant communication with Council Command. Their transmissions grew increasingly disturbing. Something is affecting the crew, thoughts that aren't our own, seeing impossible things. Ship systems are behaving erratically, power fluctuations throughout. Engineering reports the drives are operating beyond design specifications, but propulsion is decreasing. We're not alone in our minds anymore. It's showing us. No, stay back. Stay. The transmission cut off abruptly. 12 hours later, the flagship reappeared at the edge of the fleet formation. It responded to no hails, its systems apparently functioning but unresponsive to commands. When a boarding party was sent, they found the crew alive but changed, staring with vacant eyes, moving in perfect unison, speaking in voices that used council languages but expressed concepts no translator could properly interpret. The true nature of the threat began to dawn on the council. This wasn't an enemy that could be defeated with weapons or technology. It was something far more fundamental and terrifying, a contagion that infected reality itself and the minds within it. The crisis reached its terrible climax at Coruscant Prime, one of the Council's oldest and most prestigious core worlds. Home to billions and a symbol of the Council's power and cultural achievement, the planet became the focal point of a massive abyssal incursion. There was no warning, no hostile ships, no declaration of war, just a wave of silence that swept across the planet. The most advanced defense systems in the galaxy stood impotent as reality itself began to warp. Magnificent structures built to last millennia began to twist and distort. Citizens either fell into catatonic states or descended into a maddened frenzy as the world around them ceased to behave according to natural law. Emergency transmissions from the surface became increasingly desperate and incoherent. The buildings they're changing when no one is looking at them. People are forgetting who they are. Some are remembering things that never happened. The sky is wrong. The colors. The stars are disappearing one by one. In the Council Emergency Chamber, representatives watched in horror as live feed from Coruscant Prime showed a civilization coming apart at the seams, not through violence or destruction, but through a fundamental unraveling of the reality that supported it. Grand Marshal Kthar, who had built his career on military might, stood silent for perhaps the first time in his long life. His formidable weapons and strategies were meaningless against an enemy that wasn't there to fight, that perhaps wasn't even an entity in any conventional sense. Vexos, whose logical mind had always found patterns and solutions, stared at data that defied every scientific principle he had ever known. "This is impossible," he whispered, but the evidence before him refused to conform to his understanding of possibility. In the midst of this existential horror, it was High Counselor Lyranol who finally gave voice to what many had begun to suspect. This is what the humans warned us about," she said, her normally melodious voice hoarse with dread. "This is why they left." The chamber fell silent as her words sank in. The arrogant prediction made years ago, that humanity had chosen the path to its own destruction, now seemed a cruel irony. The doom the Council had so confidently prophesied for others was now falling upon themselves. "We need to contact them," Vexos said, logic finally reasserting itself. "The humans knew something we didn't. They saw this coming." "Contact them," Kthar growled. "After we mocked them? After we enshrined their foolishness in our archives? Why would they help us now?" "Because if this thing consumes the Council, it will only grow stronger," Lyranol replied. "And eventually it will reach them too. We have a common enemy, one that threatens all sentient life, perhaps all reality as we know it." After brief but intense debate, the desperate decision was made. A small, fast vessel was prepared, crewed by Lyranol herself, along with a select group of Council representatives who had shown the most restraint in condemning humanity's withdrawal. As they departed toward human space, they carried a message of urgent plea, an admission of error, a request for aid, and the humbling recognition that the species they had dismissed might be the galaxy's only hope. Earth's long-range detection grid identified the approaching Council vessel long before it reached the outer boundaries of the Sol system. Its trajectory and signature were analyzed, its communications monitored, and its non-aggressive status confirmed before Strategic Command convened to discuss the unprecedented development. "They're asking for help," Marcus Thorne reported, displaying the translated message for the gathered leadership. "Specifically, they're asking for our help against something they can't fight, something that matches the abyssal signature we've been tracking." President Jenkins studied the message, her expression grave. "It started for them, then, sooner than we projected. This is a security risk," General Rostova stated flatly. "Any contact with the Council could compromise Project Aquila. We should turn them away and let the abyssal entity consume the Council unchallenged." Dr. Thorne countered. That would only make it stronger before it eventually reaches us. Eris is right. Marcus agreed. From a strategic perspective, letting the Council fall would be catastrophic. The Abyssal would absorb trillions of minds, countless civilizations' worth of knowledge and technology. There's also the moral dimension, Dr. Thorne added. We're talking about trillions of sentient beings across thousands of worlds. Can we really turn our backs on them? Rostova's expression hardened. They turn their backs on us when we try to warn them. They deserve whatever comes for them. This isn't about what anyone deserves, President Jenkins interjected, her voice cutting through the argument. This is about survival, theirs and ours. She straightened in her chair, decision made. We will meet with the Council delegation. We will share what we know about the Abyssal signature, but we will do so on our terms. The Council vessel was escorted to Earth by a squadron of defense ships, finally docking at the orbital diplomatic station positioned in high Earth orbit. The delegation, led by High Counselor Lyra Null, was received with formal correctness but noticeable reserve. In the station's conference chamber, Lyra Null found herself facing President Jenkins, flanked by her top advisors. The ancient Eldarin noted with surprise that humans had aged considerably in the 7 years since their withdrawal, evidence of the tremendous stress they had been under. Thank you for receiving us, Lyra Null began, her dignified presence undimmed by the gravity of her mission. I come in humility, representing a council that has learned the hardest of lessons. We've monitored the situation in council space, Jenkins replied evenly. We know about Coruscant Prime and the other affected systems. Then you know why we're here, Lyra Null said. We face an enemy we cannot understand, let alone defeat. Our weapons are useless. Our science has no explanations. Our civilizations are coming apart. She paused, swallowing her species' equivalent of pride. You were right to warn us, even in the limited way you did. Now we ask, what is this thing, and how can we fight it? Jenkins exchanged glances with her advisors before nodding to Dr. Thorne. He activated a holographic display, revealing the full scope of human knowledge about the Abyssal signature, the ancient artifacts, the deep space findings, the theoretical models, and finally, Project Aquila itself. We call it the Abyssal signature, Dr. Thorne explained. Based on our research, it's not an entity in the conventional sense, but more like a non-material consciousness that operates on principles beyond standard physics. It exists partially outside our reality framework, but can intrude into it, corrupting the fundamental structure of space-time and assimilating conscious minds into its network. The Council representatives watched in stunned silence as he outlined humanity's 7-year effort to develop countermeasures. The Harmonizer Network, Thorne continued, displaying the global and orbital installation grid, generates a field that reinforces reality's fundamental structure, making it resistant to abyssal intrusion. It doesn't destroy the abyssal. We don't know if that's even possible, but it pushes it back, prevents it from corrupting our section of reality. You've built this shield around your world, Vexos asked, his scientific mind already grasping the implications. In our major colonies, General Rostova confirmed. The technology can be expanded to cover council space, but there will be conditions, Jenkins finished firmly. Lyra Null inclined her head. Name them. First, the council will publicly acknowledge its error in dismissing our warnings and recognize humanity's sovereignty and leadership role in the anti-abyssal effort. Second, we require unrestricted access to all resources and data necessary for implementing the Harmonizer technology across council space. Third, all council members must follow human protocols for Harmonizer deployment without interference or modification. Thar, who had remained uncharacteristically silent, finally spoke. You ask much of species that have ruled the stars since before your kind discovered fire. We ask for what's necessary to save your civilizations, and ultimately, ours. Jenkins replied without apology. The Abyssal doesn't recognize your political hierarchies or cultural histories. Neither can our response to it. After a moment of tense silence, Lyra Null spoke again. We accept your terms. The Council will follow humanity's lead in this fight. With that historic agreement, the greatest cooperative effort in galactic history began. The deployment of the expanded Harmonizer network became a race against time as the abyssal incursion accelerated throughout Council space. Mixed teams of human engineers and alien technicians worked around the clock, installing Harmonizer nodes and subspectrum sensors at strategic locations across thousands of star systems. Human ships, built for speed rather than combat, darted between affected worlds, bringing Harmonizer technology and the expertise to implement it. Council vessels, with their greater size and resources, transported the massive amounts of materials needed for the expanding network. The cooperation was not without friction. Many Council species struggled to adapt to human leadership after millennia of predominance. Thar-S warriors chafed under the command of human strategists half their age. Xentar scientists questioned methodologies they couldn't fully comprehend with their existing scientific frameworks. But the spreading horror of the abyssal incursion proved a powerful motivator. Resistance gave way to desperate cooperation as more worlds reported reality distortions and consciousness corruption. Dr. Eris Thorne found himself directing alien engineers whose species had been navigating the stars when humans were still discovering agriculture. The quantum resonance must maintain perfect synchronization across all nodes, he explained to a team of Xenar technicians. Even microsecond variations will create weak points in the field. Our computing systems could optimize the network more efficiently, one Xentar objected. Your computing systems operate on principles the abyssal can interface with, Thorne countered. We've specifically designed these controls to operate orthogonally to standard computational logic. It's not about efficiency, it's about being unreadable to the entity we're fighting. Meanwhile, the forward operating base established on a moon orbiting a gas giant in the Procyon system became the nerve center of the campaign. Here, President Jenkins and her core team coordinated with Council representatives to prioritize defense efforts as reports of new incursions poured in from across the galaxy. We're losing the Orion Spur, a KRYL tactical officer reported grimly. 3 more systems have gone silent in the last 6 hours. Divert the Harmonizer installation teams from the Pleiades sector, General Rostova ordered. The population density in Orion is higher. We prioritize saving lives. The Pleiades contain critical shipbuilding facilities, Thar objected. Without them, we cannot maintain our defense fleets. Shipbuilding facilities won't matter if we lose the consciousness of their operators, Marcus Thorne interjected. General Rostova is right. We prioritize populated worlds first, infrastructure. Second, the debate was interrupted by a priority alert. The Abyssal had launched a massive new incursion, targeting the Procyon system itself, a direct strike at the heart of the resistance. It's adapting, Dr. Thorne realized with horror. It's recognized the threat we pose and is targeting our command structure. The attack manifested not as a conventional military strike, but as a wave of reality distortion that swept toward the moon base. Sensors registered impossible readings as space itself seemed to warp and twist. Communication with outer system outposts became garbled, filled with reports of personnel experiencing hallucinations, memory distortions, and consciousness fragmentation. Activate the Procyon Harmonizer grid, Jenkins ordered. Full power, all nodes. Throughout the system, the newly installed Harmonizer nodes hummed to life, generating their reality-stabilizing fields. The effect was visible even to the naked eye, a subtle shimmer in space as the fundamental structure of reality was reinforced against the abyssal intrusion. The confrontation was like nothing anyone had witnessed before. Not a battle of weapons or even energies in the conventional sense, but a contest between different states of existence. Where the Harmonizer field extended, reality remained stable, minds remained autonomous, and the natural laws of physics held firm. Beyond its reach, space itself began to dissolve into patterns that hurt the eye and mind to perceive, filled with geometries that shouldn't be possible and conceptual structures that threatened sanity. For hours, the conflict hung in balance. The abyssal pressure intensified, probing for weaknesses in the harmonizer field. Several nodes failed under the strain, creating dangerous gaps that required emergency repair teams to risk their lives and sanity closing. In the command center, President Jenkins watched the tactical displays with grim determination as Dr. Thorne made constant adjustments to the harmonizer frequencies, adapting to the abyssal's attempts to bypass the field. "It's intelligent," he muttered, fingers flying across control interfaces. "Not like us, but it learns, adapts." "So do we," Jenkins replied, authorizing the activation of 3 additional harmonizer nodes that had been held in reserve. The reinforced field surged outward, pushing the abyssal incursion back from the Procyon system. The strange distortions receded, leaving normal space in their wake. Stabilized reality flowed outward like a wave, restoring proper physical laws and freeing minds from the entity's influence. When the immediate crisis passed, an exhausted cheer went up from the combined human and alien personnel. It wasn't a final victory. Far from it. But they had repelled a direct assault from an enemy that, until recently, had seemed unstoppable. "It's retreating," Marcus confirmed, studying the subspectrum sensor readings. "Pulling back to regroup, looking for easier targets. Or to adapt again," Dr. Thorne cautioned. "This was a test. It's learning about the harmonizer technology, looking for weaknesses. Then we'll keep improving it," Jenkins stated. This was just one battle in what will likely be a very long war. Thar, who had fought alongside human soldiers to protect a critical harmonizer node during the attack, approached the human leadership. For the first time, his reptilian features showed something other than contempt or reluctant cooperation. There was genuine respect in his stance. "Your people fought well," he acknowledged gruffly. "And your technology, it works where all our weapons failed." "It's not a weapon in the traditional sense," Dr. Thorne explained. "The harmonizer doesn't destroy. It heals, reinforces, stabilizes. We're not killing the abyssal. We're simply making our reality resistant to its influence." Lyra Null joined them, her ancient eyes reflecting the weight of recent events. "Perhaps that is why your species alone recognized this threat. The Council has always approached problems through the lens of power, controlling, conquering, destroying. You saw a different solution because you approached the problem differently." "We had no choice," Jenkins replied simply. "You can't fight something like the abyssal with conventional means. You can only strengthen yourself against it." As the immediate crisis subsided, the assembled leadership faced the sobering reality of their situation. The expanded harmonizer network had successfully protected a significant portion of inhabited space, but vast regions remained vulnerable. The abyssal entity, though temporarily repelled, still lurked in the darkness between stars, seeking new avenues of approach. "What happens now?" Vexos asked, his logical mind seeking the definitive next step. "Now," Jenkins said firmly, "we build. We expand the network. We refine the technology. We prepare for the next incursion and the one after that. This isn't a war that will end with a surrender or a peace treaty. It's an ongoing effort to maintain the integrity of our reality against something that exists to corrupt it." In the days that followed, a profound transformation swept through the Galactic Council. The ancient power structures that had governed for millennia began to shift as reality itself forced a new perspective. Species that had once dominated now found themselves dependent on human insight and technology. The KRYLL, whose warrior culture had always valued strength above all, now recognized that the greatest strength lay in adaptation rather than domination. The Zentaur, faced with phenomena their science couldn't explain, began to expand their definition of knowledge beyond the purely empirical. Lyra Null, whose warnings had gone unheeded, emerged as a natural leader in the Reformed Council, a bridge between the old wisdom and new necessities. Cthar and Vexos, though changed by their experiences, represented factions still coming to terms with a humbler place in the cosmic order. Most significantly, humanity, once dismissed as impulsive newcomers, now stood at the center of a galactic defense initiative. The species that had walked away had returned not as supplicants, but as saviors, bringing the only viable defense against an existential threat. 1 month after the Battle of Procyon, a formal ceremony was held aboard the rebuilt Council flagship. Representatives from all member species gathered to witness the signing of the United Defense Initiative, a new compact that placed the fight against the Abyssal at the center of all galactic priorities. President Jenkins, as Earth's representative, received the ceremonial seal of leadership, symbolizing humanity's central role in the ongoing effort. Thar, in a gesture that would have been unthinkable years earlier, ceremonially knelt before Jenkins and presented his own command insignia. "The warriors of KRYLL acknowledge true strength," he declared. "We follow Earth's lead in this battle for existence itself." Vexos, speaking for the scientific communities, formally rescinded the earlier dismissal of human concerns. "The archives will be corrected," he stated. "Where once we recorded that humanity chose the path to its own destruction, we now acknowledge that humanity chose the path that would ultimately save us all." As the ceremony concluded, Dr. Eris Thorne found himself standing beside Lyranol on an observation deck, gazing out at the stars that still shone in a reality that remained intact because of human foresight and determination. "You know this isn't over," he said quietly. "The Abyssal is still out there, still searching for ways to breach our defenses." "Yes," the ancient Eldarin agreed. "But where once it faced a fractured galaxy, species divided by pride and politics, it now faces a united defense. You withdrew from us to prepare in your own way, and in doing so, you preserved the knowledge and technology we would all need." "We nearly didn't make it in time," Thorne admitted. "If we had stayed, try to convince the Council through normal channels, you would have failed," Lyranol finished. "The Council of that time couldn't hear what it wasn't ready to understand. Sometimes walking away is the only path forward." On Earth, life gradually returned to a semblance of normalcy as the immediate crisis stabilized. The massive planetary harmonizer network, once a secret project built in shadow, now stood as a visible symbol of humanity's commitment to existential defense. The orbital installations gleamed in the sunlight, their spiral configurations generating the invisible field that kept reality itself intact. In the rebuilt council chamber, a new archive crystal was ceremonially installed, one that recorded a different prophecy than its predecessor. Where once the council had predicted doom for the species that dared walk away, the new record acknowledged a profound truth. Sometimes, those who walk alone must do so because they see a path others cannot yet perceive. The abyssal signature remained a constant presence at the edges of monitored space, testing, probing, seeking weakness. But it now faced a galaxy prepared for its intrusions, unified in purpose if not always in method. The eternal vigilance required would change civilizations, reshape priorities, and perhaps ultimately transform the very nature of sentient life in the Milky Way. As President Jenkins told the Reform Council in her address, "We do not fight for victory in the traditional sense. We fight for the right to continue existing as ourselves, autonomous minds in a reality we can comprehend. It is a battle without end, but also one we cannot afford to lose." The stars continued their ancient dance across the void, indifferent to the struggles of the tiny minds that observed them. Yet in the darkness between those stars, a new kind of light had emerged, the subtle glow of harmonizer fields extending their protective influence. Across inhabited space, a technological testament to a species that had once walked away from safety to face an incomprehensible threat alone, only to return when needed most. The prophecy of doom had indeed come to pass, but not for those it had been intended for. Instead, the doom had found those who had pronounced it, and salvation had come from those they had dismissed. It was a lesson written not just in council archives, but in the very fabric of reality that had nearly been unraveled. True wisdom sometimes requires the courage to walk a lonely path, especially when that path leads through darkness toward a light that others cannot yet see.